The trees and still pines never moved. No matter the wind, no matter the season, they stood straight and frozen, like they were listening to something we could not hear. My name is Elias. I am a 34-year-old wildlife researcher. I grew up in Tennessee and spent most of my adult life walking the green spine of Appalachia. I have mapped bird migrations, tracked bobcats, documented every inch of flora and fauna I could find. But still pines was different. It was one of those forest regions people avoided, not because it was dangerous by nature, but because locals said it was wrong how they could never say. They just shook their heads and muttered stories under their breath. Whispers about old disappearances, voices in the fog, and trees that never swayed. When I was hired by a small conservation group to study the unusual growth patterns in still pines, I jumped at the chance. The forest had no formal trail maps, no documented topography, and not a single species log in the last 40 years. It was like the land had been erased from the scientific record. I arrived in early October. The leaves were changing fast, but not in still pines, where the trees held onto their summer green like the season dared not touch them. I set up camp near a ridge they called Low Hollow. It overlooked a thick stretch of pines that extended for miles, and from the moment I stepped into that forest, I felt like I had entered a place that remembered things long buried. The first night was uneventful, quiet, colder than it should have been. But the next morning, I noticed something. There were no animal tracks, no birds, no squirrels, not even a distant call. It was like the forest had choked the life out of itself. I began my first hike inward, logging tree diameters, bark health, air quality, all standard stuff. Everything seemed ordinary until I reached a section where the trees grew perfectly spaced apart. No underbrush, no saplings, just pine after pine, straight and clean, as if someone had planted them on purpose. But there was no sign of human landscaping, no roads, no tire tracks, just forest, endless and still. That is when I heard it. A voice. Not loud, not aggressive, just a whisper floating in the trees, like someone speaking from behind a curtain. Ale. As I froze, every instinct told me to ignore it, to chalk it up to stress, the wind, anything but something in the way it said my name, the way the syllables stretched. It felt like it knew me. I called out, nothing answered, but the forest got colder. And I mean bite down to the bone cold. My breath came out in thick clouds despite the sunlight. I turned back, trudging quickly to camp. But as I left that section of trees, the cold vanished, and the normal temperature returned. That night, I reviewed the audio log from my mic. I always record my hikes for notes. And there it was, faint but clear. Eli. As come see. That voice did not sound like a person. It had this layered quality, like a woman speaking behind a wall of static, and underneath it, a low vibration, something not human. I slept with my knife that night, and every hour I woke up, expecting to hear it again. But the woods stayed silent, dead silent. Day 3, I went deeper. I needed data to justify staying. Even if I wanted to run at mile 5, I found a cabin, rotting into the earth, half collapsed, clearly abandoned. But what stood out was the trees around it. They were scorched at the base, blackened rings like someone tried to burn them, but only the lower few feet had been affected, like the fire stopped or refused to climb. Inside the cabin were scraps of furniture, moldy cloth, a broken stove, and a journal. I opened it. The last entry was smeared with something dark and flaking, but the legible line said, It watches when the wind dies. The voice calls from the stillness. Do not listen. Do not look into the trees. My throat went dry. I took the journal, snapped photos, and backed out of that cabin like it might bite me. As I turned, I saw something behind the trees, just for a second. A silhouette, tall, thin, unmoving. No face, just shadow. It vanished when I blinked. But the trees, they still did not move, not a sway. Not a single needle disturbed. I made it back to camp. I nearly packed up to leave, but curiosity is poison, and I needed answers. That night, the voice came back clearer, closer. Eli, as you are close. I held the journal in my lap, staring at the last page, and something in me snapped. I needed to go back. I needed to know what was calling. So I waited until morning, took only what I needed, and went back to the scorched ringed trees, but the cabin was gone. I swear to you, the clearing was still there. Same shape, same ridgeline. But the cabin had vanished. No ruins, no foundation, just soft, untouched grass, like it had never been there. That was when I heard footsteps. But they were not mine, and they were not human. They were slow, heavy, dragging. I hid behind a tree, held my breath, and watched as something stepped out of the pines. It looked like a man. But wrong, too tall, arms too long, skin gray and stretched, and its face, it had none. Just a blank, smooth surface, like tree bark without knots. It stopped, tilted its head like it heard me breathing, and whispered, "Look." I ran. Branches whipped my face, rocks twisted my ankles, but I ran until the trees thinned, until the temperature rose, until the wind finally blew again. When I got back to camp, I checked the GPS logs and confirmed it. The cabin location was real. I had marked it, photographed it, even recorded the voice nearby, but now it was gone. I listened again to the audio from that morning and heard more than just the whisper this time. In the background, very faint, there was a sound like something dragging over bark and breathing, wet, guttural breathing. I sent the journal photos to my contact at the conservation agency. He replied only once, 5 words, then stopped responding entirely. Get out of still pines. I tried to sleep that night, but the voice would not stop. It came every hour. Closer, sharper, repeating my name like a warning or an invitation. Eli. As stay with us. Eli. As listen. Eli. As we remember. I covered my ears, turned on the radio, but static poured through it, even with no signal. It was like the forest was inside the device itself. At exactly 3:03 a.m., every sound stopped, even the static, even the wind, even my own heartbeat felt slower, like the forest was holding its breath. Then from the edge of my campsite, I heard it. Not the voice, not the breathing, but a sound like bones clicking together. And then the words, "You saw it. Now you are part of it." I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the woods. There was nothing, only trees, but my light flickered every time it landed on the pines, like they absorbed the light, drank it in. I did not sleep at all. When the sun rose, I decided to hike out. I had seen enough, heard enough. The job was over, but when I reached the old fire road, it was gone. As in, no sign it ever existed. The trees were solid wall, no tire tracks, no gravel, just thick roots and pine needles like nothing had ever passed through. I checked the compass. It spun slowly in place, then stopped completely. I was not just lost. The forest had changed. I turned back, trying to retrace my steps, but every marker I had placed was gone. Every trail flag, every scratch on the bark, Gone. The forest was swallowing the path behind me, closing in like a maze that shifted when you blinked. For the next few hours I wandered, calling out, listening, marking trees again, trying to stay calm. Then I saw the girl. She stood about 30 yards ahead in a patch of moss between two tall pines. She wore a white dress, barefoot, hair down. To her waist, she was not breathing, just standing still. I called out. She did not respond. I stepped forward, and that was when she turned her head, not slowly but in one jerking motion, as if her neck were a loose hinge. Her eyes were black. No whites, just voids, and her mouth began to move, but the sound that came out was not hers. It was my own voice, screaming, "Help me, help me, help me," repeated over and over, until I fell backward and scrambled away. I did not stop running until I hit another clearing. And there, in the dirt, were dozens of carvings, names etched into the ground: Elias, Lorna, Tate, Beth, dozens, and they were still fresh. Not old, not faded, like someone had carved them just minutes before. I looked down, and my boots had begun to sink into the soil. Not mud, but something softer, like flesh under the leaves. I pulled free and stumbled back, and the earth let out a low moan. The ground was alive. I kept moving, desperately, until I found something I never thought I would see again. The cabin. It was back, standing whole. I ran inside, slamming the rotten door behind me. But inside it looked nothing like before. It was clean new. There were candles burning, and something cooking on a wood stove. I was not alone. A man sat in the corner, eyes wide, unblinking, skin pale and translucent, veins showing like cracks in porcelain. He smiled, but the smile was wrong. Too wide, too many teeth. "You came back," he said, "but you never left." I asked him who he was, and he responded with my name over and over, whispering it in different voices: men, women, children, all from his single mouth. Then he stood, and I realized he had no feet, just roots, twisting out of his legs, burying into the floorboards. I ran, again. The candlelight exploded into darkness, and the voice followed me, louder now, filling the trees, the ground, the sky. Still pines. Remembers still pines feeds, still pines grows. I tripped, hit my head, and everything went black. When I woke up, it was dark. Camp was gone, gear gone. Even my clothes were different, old, worn, like I had been living here for months. The forest was not just keeping me, it was changing me. And then I heard footsteps, close, crunching leaves, deliberate, heavy. I turned and saw someone walking toward me. It was me, same face, same clothes, same scar on the eyebrow. But the eyes were hollow, and behind him, hundreds more, all versions of me, pale, empty, smiling. The one in front spoke. "You came too close, now you stay, now you join." I stumbled backward, but the line of me clones stepped in sync, perfect, like puppets, strings pulled by roots beneath their feet. Forest moaned again, not wind, but voice, a low vibration, like hundreds whispering just beneath the bark. My clone reached out, not to touch but to point, and behind me the trees had opened, literally bent backward, creating a narrow path lined with bone-white branches. I did not want to enter, but the forest pulled at me. Roots moved under my boots, guiding, insisting. Then I heard the girl again, laughing, soft, sweet, wrong. I walked past, branches brushed my shoulders, and each time, a whisper echoed in my ears. "You heard us, you saw us, you belong to us." The deeper I went, the brighter the air became not sunlight, but something else, a kind of glow, faint blue like moonlight filtered through deep water. Then, the trees opened, and I saw Ida's stone circle, half buried, covered in moss and black feathers, in the center a massive tree, black charred, still burning without flame, and tied to that tree was the girl. She did not struggle. She watched me, smiling around her feet. Dozens of skulls, some animal, some not. The tree spoke not with sound, but into my mind 1,000 voices, one message: Elias, 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 come closer, let us grow from you. I tried to turn, but my body would not move. The roots beneath the moss wrapped my ankles, climbed my legs, pulled me forward inch by inch. I neared the girl. Her face began to change, aging, rotting, then rebuilding like someone flipping through her entire life, birth to death, over and over. She whispered, only once, do not listen, run, run. The tree screamed, an inhuman screech that made my teeth ache, my mind split. Memories rewrote themselves. I was 5, I was 30, I was dying, I was being born. Over and over, the ground buckled, and the stone circle cracked from beneath it. Hands, hundreds of hands reached up, pale, thin, grasping. They were the lost, the ones who heard the voice and stayed. I knew it then. Still Pines was not a place, it was a thing, a living forest, a hive mind, a trap. It called people, sang to them, fed on their fear, their blood, their souls. And I was next. I closed my eyes and screamed a raw animal scream, and for a moment, everything paused. The tree shuddered, the roots recoiled, and the girl broke free. She grabbed my hand, whispered something in a language I did not know, and everything exploded into light. I woke on the forest floor near my truck. Still Pines was behind me, silent, untouched. I had no idea how I got back. My phone was dead. My GPS melted, literally warped like it had been in a fire. I drove blindly. Hours passed. When I reached a gas station, I asked the clerk what town I was in. He looked at me confused. You are about 20 miles from Still Pines, been abandoned since the 50s. Fires took out the whole place. No one goes in there now, bad land. I showed him a photo I had taken of the cabin. He shook his head. That is the old mill watch house, burned down decades ago. Nothing left but ash and stories. I got back to my apartment and everything seemed normal. But that night the whispers started again, not from the woods, but from the walls. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see myself, not really my reflection. Smiled, but I did not, and every night since the voice returns, not always with words, sometimes just breathing wet close inside. A week later, I received a package, no return address inside. The journal I had left behind, but now it was thicker, filled with entries I never wrote, dates I had not lived, thoughts I never had, drawings of me, changing, roots growing from my fingers, my eyes black, mouths growing from my palms. One entry read, he is ready, Still Pines accepts. I tried to burn the journal. It would not catch water, did not soak it. Blades did not cut it. Buried it in concrete. Still every night it appears again on my nightstand, open to the same page. The drawing changes bit by bit. Each time I look more like the man in the cabin, pale, smiling, hollow. Last week, I got a call from a blocked number. I answered, no voice, just breathing. Then a whisper, familiar, the girl. You escaped, but not for long. Still Pines always calls its own. I moved, changed city, states, still it finds me. Trees near my window that were not there the day before, birds that do not sing, just watch, and every now and then, on the radio through the static, my name over and over and over. Elias, Elias, Elias. I do not know how long I have, but if you are reading this, if you ever hear a voice in the woods, soft inviting calling your name, do not answer. Do not listen, because some forests are alive, some remember, and still pines never forgets. I began recording myself while I slept. I had to know what was real. The first few nights nothing, but on the fourth night I saw it. My body rose from bed slowly around 2 a.m. eyes open, but empty. I walked to the corner of my room, stood motionless facing the wall, murmuring. Audio picked up only fragments. Beneath bark, behind breath, we live, we hunger, we wait. Then I reached into my mouth and pulled something out long, thin, black like a root. When I woke, there was dirt under my nails, leaves on the floor, and a pinnacone sitting neatly on my chest, but I had locked the door, nailed the windows shut. Still, it came still. I left. I reached out to Dr. Carmichael. Again begged him to meet in person. He agreed. When I arrived at the cafe, he was already seated. But he was not alone. 2 other people sat with him, eyes tired, faces pale, but somehow familiar. They had all been to Still Pines. Each had left, but none had escaped. One woman, her name was Valerie, saw and she lost her daughter in those woods, vanished after hearing a voice calling from the trees. Another man, Keith, said he found his brother's body nailed to a tree, his own name carved into his chest. They formed a group, a kind of survivor's circle, but no one was surviving. Not really, because the woods followed Still Pines was not rooted to one place. It grew wherever its chosen went. It fed off their memories, wove itself into their minds, until they no longer knew what was real. Dr. Carmichael handed me a note, one line. It does not want you dead, it wants you hollow. The next night, I tried staying awake, caffeine, loud music, lights on, but at 3:07 a.m., my vision blurred. My limbs failed, sleep took me. Dreamed of the girl again, but now she was older, aged, her skin bark, her hair moss. She sat beneath that blackened tree, holding something. In her lap it was me, small, shrunken, eyes wide and empty. A puppet made of flesh, she whispered to it, fed it roots. And it grew until it stood, looked just like me, and walked away. She looked at me, then into me, and said one thing. He walks now and you are fading. I awoke screaming, but it was not my voice. It came from the mirror. My reflection was speaking, but I was silent. It said, you left part of yourself there, and it is growing. I smashed the mirror, but it did not shatter. It bled, dark sap-like, blood thick and sticky from the cracks. Tiny black pine needles spilled out like hair, twitching. That day, I felt hollow, like parts of me had gone missing. I could not remember my mother's voice, could not recall the name of my first pet, even my own. Handwriting looked foreign. Still Pines was eating me from inside, and no one could help. No priest, no doctor, no prayer. So I decided to go back, not to escape, but to end. I'd returned with fire, gasoline, matches, salt, iron. I would burn it, every tree, every shadow. But when I arrived, the forest was gone. Still Pines was now a field, flat, empty, silent. No trees, no path, just grass, as if it had never been there. But I knew better. Still Pines was hiding inside now, within me, and when I turned to leave, I saw him standing by my truck, wearing my face, smiling. He waved and then walked into the trees that should not be there, and they swallowed him. I never returned after that. I have seen him in crowds and reflections on TV screens, turned off watching. Sometimes I black out for hours, wake up in different clothes, with dirt on my hands. Once I found a scrap of bark in my mouth, another time, a note in my handwriting. I do not remember writing. Soon, I do not know how long I have left before he replaces me fully. Before I am the one behind the mirror, smiling empty, so I wrote this all of it. Because if I disappear, if you hear I moved or died, or went crazy, know this: it was still pines. It reached through me, used me, and it will do the same to you if you listen too closely. If you follow the voice, if you ever hear your name whispered in the woods, do not turn. Do not answer, because once you hear it, you belong to it, and still pines never lets go.